All right, guys, something interesting came out about Nathan Phillips, the Indian man that got in the face of those Catholic boys trying to instigate something. And something very interesting's come out about him, and I don't see other people talking about this. I saw Stefan Molyneux briefly mention it in his initial reaction video to the whole thing. And this whole story is really interesting to me, partly for personal reasons, which I'll get to towards the end of the video. But in my lifetime, I've never seen a story quite like this, just how big it's getting too, over something that's really such a non-issue and is really initially a fake news story. But it just shows how in our country, things are coming to a head. All the political differences, all the racial issues, everything seems like it's coming to a head. And I don't know what that means for America. I don't know if that means, God forbid, a civil war or an economic collapse or some sort of total restructuring of our society. But think about this. When we had the actual Civil War, the North and the South probably didn't hate each other as much as liberals and conservatives seem to hate each other these days. So think about that. But this is something that I think is very important about this guy's background. It's of particular interest to me, this story, but it should be to interest to you because I think it says a lot about him. The story, this is from a local Detroit news. They said that Native American claims racial harassment by EMU students dressed as Indians. Now, apparently Nathan Phillips, I don't know if he's from Ypsilanti, Michigan, or just lived there, but I used to live there myself, and I'm very familiar with the area because I went to Eastern Michigan University. The story that apparently Eastern Michigan University students did something so terrible, so let's find out what that is by watching this story from the Detroit News.
It hit me in the head, but I backed up and hit me in the chest.
A Native American man under attack at Eastern Michigan University. Tonight on The Edge, Native injustice. The man says he was trying to teach.
Listen to the language they're using. Native injustice. All this incendiary language. All these strong words. And they're talking about this as if there's this great injustice that's happened and it's a matter of fact. So let's see what evidence are presented. Let's see what the facts come out here, what they present.
The students a lesson about respecting Native Americans when things took a bad turn. Fox News' Dave Spencer
said he was trying to give them a lesson about respecting Native Americans. Apparently, he's just an educator, guys, trying to educate us ignorant white folks. So let's see.
More on the alleged incident that's now leading to a protest.
Now, notice the word that he just used there to kind of cover his butt. The alleged incident. Before they were talking about this, using this strong language, presenting it all as if this has happened factually. Now he briefly puts that word in there, the alleged incident. He had to get that in there, so keep that in mind.
There's a sweat lodge under construction in the back of Nathan Phillips' home.
Represents the stages of life: infancy, youth, adult, elder.
A place where he can go to pray and meditate. Then
I like the way they're presenting him as a very peaceful, spiritual man, wherein obviously he's not too into spirituality if it's Catholic schoolboys, and he's not very peaceful. He doesn't have a problem walking up to minors and beating a drum in their face. But he's a very peaceful, spiritual man, they would have you think.
Come out reborn. And he plans to use this one to cleanse himself of a recent experience that he can't seem to shake.
That's what I was off doing, is just trying to figure out how to put a few dollars in my pocket so I could eat that night.
He said he was trying to put a few dollars in his pocket so he can eat. He's a very down on his luck individual. But however, of course, he has ties to these left-wing organizations. He has funding, obviously, to get the news to come out, especially in a big market like Detroit. Detroit is one of the largest markets in the United States, top 10, if not top 5 largest in the entire country. But somehow he got on the phone to them from Ypsilanti and knew how to talk them into coming out, getting in their news van and coming out and interviewing him, even though he has no evidence. I mean, can you imagine if when I lived in Ypsilanti, Michigan, I called the Detroit News and I said, yeah, some black guy said some mean things to me. Can you come out and interview me? Do you think they're going to get in their news van and drive out to Ypsilanti, which is like 30 miles outside of Detroit, crossing county lines? And as you can imagine, in any large city, you don't want to drive 30 miles in that kind of big city traffic. But for whatever reason, he knows how to get them out to come out and present his side of the story and interview him, even though there's no footage, there's no actual evidence that he can present. I mean, look at these shots that they're presenting in their news story. Shots of sidewalks, shots of houses, shots of backyards. That's their B-roll because they actually have nothing.
It was a walk he took at noon on a Saturday in mid-April, walking by a home where he saw Eastern Michigan University students dressed as Native Americans.
They had little...
Now, he never says how he knows that they're Eastern Michigan University students. Did he ask to see their student IDs? I don't know, but listen to this.
Feathers on, and I was going to just walk by, but a group of them said, hey, come on over. Hey, come here.
He says he walked over to the fence and saw roughly 30 to 40 students involved in a theme party.
Painted and had their face painted. And what the heck's going on here? Right. Oh, we're honoring you. So no.
Now, here he's making the accusation that these so-called students called him over because they saw that he's an American Indian man and they want to talk to him since they were having an Indian-themed party. And let me say this, if you're not familiar with Southeast Michigan, it's a very multiracial place, a very heavy black population. There's a lot of multiracial people there. Now, if you just look at this guy, especially if it's dark outside, if it's nighttime, are you just going to assume that this guy's an American Indian? I mean, this guy could be anything. He could, especially in the dark, he could look black, he could look biracial, he could be Hispanic, could be Asian. I don't think most people are just going to assume, oh, this guy's an Indian.
No, you're not honoring me.
A statement he says they took offense to.
Then they started hooping and hollering.
They were the ones to take offense. Actually, this is the guy that's going around claiming to be offended by people dressing as Indians or which is funny, that would be dressing as his ancestors. Well, this guy's dressing like a typical Western guy, a typical white guy. We're not upset that he's dressing in our garb.
I said, well, that wasn't, honoring, that was racist. And then at that time, that's when it really got ugly.
Phillips says he was then bombarded with racial slurs.
Go back to the reservation.
Again, look at these B-roll shots. I mean, what is this that they're even showing? I don't know what this is. This is some garbage. It literally, I don't know what it is. It looks like something like a children's toy that someone threw out. How is this relevant to the story?
You blank Indian.
One, he says, even threw a beer can.
If I would have stayed right where I was at, it would have hit me in the head, but I backed up and hit me in the chest.
He'd had enough at this.
They threw a beer can at him. Now, I don't know if you know anything about college students, especially Eastern Michigan college students. They really like their beer. They're not just throwing it away. So I think we can presume that this was an empty can they threw at him, but of course, there's no evidence. This whole thing most likely did not happen.
Point, and says he called police.
By the time the police got there, it was like there was no party there at all.
By the time the police got there, it's like there was no party there at all. Probably because there was no party there. That's why there would be no evidence that a party took place. Despite all these wild college students dressed in Indian costumes throwing beer cans around, there's no evidence that a party happened.
Filed the report with campus police, who tell us they are investigating the matter. When we stop by the home in question, "Hi there, anyone home? Dave Spencer with Fox 2. Someone came to the door but didn't open up. I asked Phillips why he went over to the fence. Why not just walk away?
For me just to walk by there and have a blind eye to it, something just didn't allow me to do that.
He claims this group referred.
Something didn't allow him just to walk by and let people use their freedom of expression, their freedom of speech. He couldn't allow that to just go on.
To themselves as the Hurons, a former mascot at EMU.
The mascot?
Yeah, the mascot at Eastern Michigan University. It used to be the Eastern Michigan Hurons, which was a local Indian tribe. Then because of political correctness, they changed to the very lame and generic Eagles, which, by the way, behind the university, going through Ypsilanti, there's a river called the Huron River. They never changed that. And notice this guy doesn't complain that the river's still named the Huron River.
Issue at the university over here was changed 20 years ago. That I'm dealing with it here 20 years later is just... I don't know. There's just...
Talk about first world problems, huh? This guy has no idea clearly how hard life is for people living in third world countries.
There's a lot of hate behind that.
As for what he thinks should happen to the students he claims harassed him, he hopes others can learn from this.
Whoever would sit judgment on them, the university, the law, you know.
Notice the law. So he wants the law to pass judgment on him. Well, first of all, one person he claims hit him with a beer can, which would be assault. That would be a violation of law. But nothing else that anyone would have done in this story is actually illegal. But he wants the law to get involved and to take action against them.
Society, you know, that's their job. You know, I'll pray for them. You know, I'll pray for that they can see a better way.
The university issued a statement regarding what happened on this street earlier this month, saying that the investigation is ongoing and they're guided by the university's policies and procedures. But some students we spoke with say they're not satisfied with that response. That's why they're holding a news conference of their own tomorrow to make sure this issue is not forgotten. In Ypsilanti.
Yeah, Eastern Michigan University. It's the very stereotypical large American liberal university, very SJW. So, of course, they're going to get on this. It's funny because there was a news story about a year ago where there was a fake hate crime. Someone wrote like the N-word, and it turned out when they found out who did it, it was a black guy, but they were causing all this uproar. Oh, these evil white racists, and it turned out it was a black guy that did it. So I think this says a lot about the background of Nathan Phillips. He has a history of knowing how to get publicity and present himself as a victim, and he seems to be a professional victim, and he has ties to big money. He has some sort of funding. So this is not just random that this thing happened. And something I want to say, this story strikes me very personally because I have a history with something similar. When I was in high school, my first month in high school, an Indian girl told the female vice principal that I called her a racial slur. Now, when confronted about this, of course, there was no evidence that I called her a racial slur because the whole thing simply didn't happen. It was just an accusation, completely made up. I don't even know why this girl decided to try and get me in trouble. Maybe she liked me. Maybe she had a crush on me and she had a weird teenage way of lashing out at me. I don't know. But I found out a very important lesson from the lady vice principal that day. I found out that as a white man, you are guilty until proven innocent. And obviously, especially in something like that, it's basically impossible to prove your innocence. But I was treated so poorly. I was treated as if I was totally guilty, even though there was no evidence for this. There was no proof. The whole thing never happened. So I talk about problems on this channel a lot. And I do that with the goal to try and hopefully give you solutions. But it's very hard. It was hard back then when I was in high school. And now we're seeing things go to such an extreme level where these boys acted perfectly. The one boy that's in all the viral photos smiling, which is like a 2-hour video. They got that one photo of him where he smiles for a second to try and make him look bad, where he said, I knew everyone was recording this, so I just wanted to make sure I kept my composure and didn't do anything, even though this guy was trying to get in his face. So really, these kids, especially that one kid, acted very perfectly. There was nothing wrong, but that didn't stop the lying corporate media from trying to create a total fake story. They were putting out stories that these young MAGA kids got in the way of this elderly Indian man and wouldn't let him pass, when in reality, later video surfaced where the Indian guy approached them and got in their face and was the aggressor in the whole thing. So they tried to change the total reality until the reality thankfully got out. If you remember my video yesterday, which hopefully you'll check out, where I talk about corporations, how their number one goal is not to make money. Think about it. For the corporate media, what was there to profit from this? Maybe some of the smaller indie media, they can get those clicks from people getting angry and those anger clicks. But if you're CNN or the New York Times, are they really profiting from this financially? No. Because for corporations, and not just media companies, what's more important than making money is actually controlling the narrative, controlling the story, ultimately controlling the thinking and the minds of the public. That's worth much more to them than actual money. Money's not a problem for them. These big companies are not going out of business. So keep that in mind. So is what we've seen in this whole story, the larger story with these Catholic boys. We've seen Hollywood celebrities, Democrats, the corporate media calling for them to be doxxed, for their names, their addresses to get out, people calling for violence against them. We have people trying to call the universities where they applied, saying, don't let this person in, trying to totally ruin these boys' lives that did nothing wrong. And we expect that from those types. We know we're always going to be attacked, but ultimately what's most disappointing in this whole story, their local Catholic diocese and their local bishop and their school was very quick to denounce these boys and throw them under the bus before the facts came out that they were innocent. Which is funny, because anytime a priest is accused of doing something, even when there's lots of evidence, they don't want to turn on him, but they were very quick to turn on these boys and the church and the school. This is supposed to be the leaders for them, spiritually, morally, intellectually, and they had no loyalty to these people that support them, both in terms of finances and as well as give other types of support. The Catholics were very quick to throw these guys under the bus, which says a lot about them, at least this local diocese. So my friends, if you have a solution to this, go ahead, leave a comment. If you have any thoughts about any of this story at all, go ahead, leave a comment on this. But I thought that this was very important to bring up these points, because I haven't seen anyone else talking about it. Like I said, Stefan Molyneux, he just mentioned this story, but it was literally just a mention. We had to cover this a lot more in depth. So go ahead, have a discussion in the comments down below, and be sure to enjoy and check out my other videos on this channel.